বইগুলো একটা তুমি দাও। May I now request Mr. Prashanto Datta to present Swamiji with some Angobastram and a fruit basket. প্রেসিডেন্টের দিকে চলে যাও তুমি শালটা নিয়ে। May I request Swamiji to accept the shawl from Dr. Ghosh.
Everything remains incomplete without the seal. Everything remains incomplete without the seal.
Everything remains incomplete without Mishti. May I request Mr. Prashanto Datta to kindly introduce Swamiji.
Thank you, Pradeep. Thanks to the President for giving me the opportunity to introduce Swami Sarvapriyananda ji. It's a pleasant work for me. Good evening, everybody. A few months back, after the pujas, the President one day in his chamber called me, Prashanto, you want to do something on the auspicious occasion of Swamiji's birthday. Then, after a month, I learned that Swami Sarvapriyananda is coming to India. Sarvapriyananda is coming to India. Then I contacted him, and last Saturday, he was pleased to give consent. I am thankful. Pranam to Swamiji. Most of us present here are followers of Swamiji in social media. So, for his introduction, I will be very brief. Before Shunnash, Swamiji was born in Calcutta, and thereafter completed his education in Bhubaneswar. He was a management graduate from XIMB Bhubaneswar. Swamiji joined Ramakrishna Order, Sri Ramakrishna Order in 1994. Then after that he went for further studies in Harvard. He held many important posts in Ramakrishna Mission. He was in San Francisco, assistant in charge of Vedanta. Now, thereafter, in the training college in Belur, Howrah. Now he is in charge of Vedanta Mission, New York. He is, the Google say Swami Sarvapriyananda is a Hindu monk. I disagree. He is one of the most great philosopher of the modern age. Monk is not his only identity. So, it is a philosophy of life. Let us listen to his today's deliberation, Vedanta in daily life. Dhanyavad, namaskar.
আমি এটা এখানে অসুবিধা হবে? ঠিক আছে।
असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय mrityurma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness unto light, lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Namaskar and good evening, everybody. Respected President of Calcutta Club, Prashanta Babu, who was indefatigable, whose endless persistence, that's the result which you see here this evening. And this amazing audience, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here, and I mean it. I couldn't have expected this amazing gathering here in Calcutta Club this evening. I must start with a confession. The Calcutta Club, I've been here once earlier, I was giving a talk, and this was the place of one of my greatest faux pas. So I'll start with that. This was more than 10 or 12 years ago, and the Rotary Club had invited me for a talk here at one of the rooms here in Calcutta Club. And I remember going in there. I had come early, so I was waiting for the audience to gather. And this lady, she came up to me, very gracious, very hospitable. She made me feel at home. We talked. She was asking me about where I had given talks. And I said, last week I had gone to Burdwan University. And she said, oh, Bardhaman Vishwavidyalaya, Kothai, where did you give your talk? And I described that Golab Bagh campus there. And then she said, oh, ota to amar ghar chilo. I was a little taken aback. That is a big auditorium. How can it be, like a girl's play, room? Then she said, oh, I should have introduced myself. She was the princess of Burdwan. So, Burdwan Rajbari. So she had, her father is basically the one who had donated the Golab Bagh campus. And as a kid, she lived in the which is now a university auditorium, ওই বাচ্চা মেয়েটির রাজকুমারীর ওটা ঘর ছিল. Now, the faux pas was, when the talk started, I started with, Swami Vivekananda, practical Vedanta, and Swami Vivekananda, how he had said that this Vedanta was most practical. It was of interest to kings and emperors. If you go back to the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, Arjuna, in the Upanishads you go back to King Janaka and others, Ajatashatru and others. So it was a philosophy which was considered to be of utmost practical use by kings and emperors, people with tremendous responsibilities, those who were extremely busy. The emperors and kings of ancient times were, they had real responsibilities. They were not like the royalty of present times, who are basically just, symbols and they don't have actual power or responsibility. Eta ami mukhosto kore eschilam bole gelam. Now she was sitting right there in front. Then I realized suddenly the gentleman sitting next to her was nudging her, tomar bishoy bolche ar ki. But yes, that's a good place to start. Vedanta is a philosophy which is of tremendous practical utility. I think that's the reason why the Bhagavad Gita, Vedanta was put in the Bhagavad Gita, which is set in the battlefield, and not in an ashram, not in Sanskrit or toll, like a rishi's ashram or in a monastery. It's set in the battlefield, in the midst of crisis. And the highest philosophy is taught there. Arjuna's question had nothing to do with philosophy. He just wanted an answer, to solve his ethical dilemma. But instead of giving him a direct answer, should I fight this battle or should I not? Krishna gave him the highest Vedantic philosophy, drawing upon the Upanishads. Therefore, Vedanta is something that is useful in our daily life. If kings and emperors, people who were very busy under tremendous stress and responsibility, if they found a use for it, if they found it of great psychological support and a source of strength and inspiration in their day-to-day lives, how much more so we can derive benefit from it. Swami Vivekananda says that it's no excuse to say that we are busy, we have no time. Those emperors and kings were far busier than we are. If they found time for it, we can very well find time for philosophy in the midst of our life. So we'll dive straight into the heart of Vedanta. What I propose to do here in the time remaining to me is explore the heart, the core of Vedanta. I'll present it in a language, as far as I've understood, in a language which is relatable in this day and age. And then we will see what use is it to us, to everybody here. Not just for monks, not just for scholars, but also for the person in the midst of the daily struggle of life, everybody. Vedanta starts with the question, who am I or what am I? This question goes back to very ancient times. Right now there is an upsurge in interest in consciousness studies. We are living at a very interesting time. In the last 20 years or so, psychologists, brain scientists, neuroscientists, philosophers, AI, people interested in AI and computer science, a lot of people are interested in what is consciousness. Evan Thompson, who is a professor of philosophy at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, in his book, Waking, Dreaming, Being, he begins the book by saying, consciousness studies did not start today. It's not a new subject. It started thousands of years ago in the Indo-Gangetic plain in the texts called the Upanishads. Thousands of years ago. And then he goes on to say, these Upanishads are so central in the history of human thought that we should date history not by BC and AD, but before Upanishad and after Upanishad. Now, as a monk, as an Indian, we are a little reticent. We won't go forward. We feel it's rather in poor taste, to say that all of history should be dated with before Upanishad and after Upanishad. But Shahib Jokhon bolchen thiki ache. I mean, since he has said it, Evan Thompson has said it. But it's important. What's the question there? One of those Upanishads, they're all in the form of inquiries, questions, and philosophical explorations. One Upanishad starts like this. Kene shitam patati preshitam mana, kene shitam vachamimam vadanti, chakshu shrotra kaudeva yunakti. That means, inspired by what, illuminated by what, impelled by what are these words being uttered? Are these thoughts being thought in the mind? By what do we get the experience of seeing and hearing? All our conscious experiences. And then the answer is given in a rather paradoxical way. Shrotrasya shrotram manaso manoyat. The answer to this question, what is that which gives us the experience of thinking, talking, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching? And the answer is, it is the ear of the ear, it is the eye of the eye, it is the mind of the mind, it is the speech of the speech. It's an indirect way of referring to consciousness. That one principle in all of us, which gives us this first-person experience. It's a bit like all these electrical devices. Here is the microphone, which is amplifying sound. Here are the bright lights, which are illuminating everything. There is the screen, where it projects an image. All of these, the devices are different. The functions they perform are various. But they're all inert until there's one principle which runs through all of them and makes them do what they're designed to do. And we'll of course say it's electricity. That's a good example, a good metaphor. There is one principle behind all our conscious experiences, and that is consciousness. Call it consciousness, call it awareness. There are many, many words in Sanskrit for this principle. Chaitanya, Chetan, Chit, Samvit, Bodha, many, many words. This is something that our ancient Indians, Hindus, the Vedic Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, philosophers of a wide range of views, they investigated what is consciousness. Centuries ago, millennia ago. Now, before we go on, let me deal with one possible question. Someone might say, "Ete ar bodo kotha ki?" There is a brain. Nowadays we know the brain functions and it generates consciousness. That's it. Why make such a big deal out of it? There's nothing very philosophical or even less so spiritual about consciousness. So here we have to stop and think a little bit. I'd heard a talk by Marvin Minsky. He was a very famous mathematician with seminal contributions to information science. So in one place, he's a reductionist as far as consciousness is concerned. He says there is no mystery about consciousness. It is just that we don't understand seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting. We don't understand thinking, remembering, desiring. Then we put all of it in one basket and call it the problem of consciousness. But when we investigate these processes in depth, we will find some kind of physical basis for all of these things. So this idea, which might be called, which is called materialist reductionism. Consciousness is nothing very great. It's just the brain and its activities. That's all. This idea is not new. Thousands of years ago, there were materialists in ancient India, the so-called Charvakas, who said, this Chaitanya, consciousness, how is it produced? And they gave an example which we today in India, especially in Bengal, can easily relate to. They said, when you chew a pan, and I can say pan here, I have to do a lot of work to explain what a pan is in United States. But when you chew a pan, there's nothing red in the constituents of the pan. But when we chew it, then your tongue turns red, your lips turn red. So just as the components of the pan, which are not red, but upon being chewed, they produce a red color. Similarly, the physical components of the body, where there is no consciousness, but when they interact with each other, they produce this wonderful thing called consciousness. It's entirely physical. So this is the position of the Charvaka. And in principle, it's exactly the position of the materialist reductionist today. Is there anything special about consciousness? Well, I am here to tell you that there is. We live in a time, the last 20, 25 years, have been very amazing in this regard. First of all, this question of consciousness is very important. It's very, very important. It's because of this that you are able to hear what I am saying. That you're able to see me. I'm able to think and speak. All our personal experiences, our first-person experiences, what we call subjective experiences, basically our life itself, is because of consciousness. So what is consciousness is a big question. Is it just the brain, or is it something different? Is there something special about consciousness? Right now, we are living in an age, there is something called the hard problem of consciousness. David Chalmers, who is an Australian philosopher, and he, in fact, is right now in New York University. He's the head of the Mind-Brain Consciousness Unit. He coined the phrase, the hard problem of consciousness, a couple of decades ago. By that, what he means is that what we call consciousness, this deep personal experience, it cannot be reduced to the objective processes going on in the brain. His point is this. What we observe in the brain, as you go deeper with our latest imaging technologies, fMRI scans and all, when we observe what's going on in the brain, the last and the most precise, the subtlest thing we can detect are the subtle electrical activities going on in the neurons in the brain. Fine. So the final thing that you can detect with our instruments, the last objective thing that you can detect in the brain are some electrical activity going on in the neurons. How that electrical activity translates into our vivid first-person experience. You are seeing colors. You're hearing sound. We feel pain. We feel pleasure. We think. We imagine. We love. We hate. We remember. We fail to remember. We are awake. We dream. We sleep. All of these experiences. How is it bursts of electricity? There is some correlation, clearly. When the electrical activity in the brain, there's a neural correlate. So when you feel pain, and the scientist will scan the brain and see that some part of the brain is lit up. But is it correlation? Is not causation. And especially when the explanatory gap, it's called an explanatory gap, the gap is so big. Imagine, burst of electricity, taste of Rasgulla. There's a huge gap. How is it translating into the vivid first-person experience? And it's not a small thing. This vivid first-person experience is what we call life itself. And so David Chalmers said, you cannot reduce our first-person experiences. All these experiences of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, remembering. এই যে ভেতরের অনুভব, the Sanskrit word is very interesting, anubhava. So this anubhava, you cannot reduce it to just brain processes. How are these brain processes producing a subjective experience? Notice, everything in the universe, whatever you see here, has a physical dimension, and that's all. None of these things have an internal subjective aspect to it, except your brain. How is that possible? The brain has an objective aspect, which you can scan and dissect and observe. But an internal subjective aspect, which is basically you and I and him and her. How? So this is called the hard problem of consciousness. About 25 years ago, one of the leading neuroscientists, Christoph Koch, and David Chalmers, they had a bet, a challenge, a bet. Christoph Koch said the way neuroscience is progressing, within 25 years, we'll be able to explain consciousness in terms of brain activity. 25 years. And David Chalmers said, no, you cannot do it. Because it's, in principle, you're making a category mistake. You're trying to explain something that is subjective in terms of objective processes. It can't be done. So they had a bet, 25 years. And they'd forgotten about it until about a few months ago, somebody reminded them, 25 years are over. So who won the bet? Have we been able to understand consciousness in terms of brain? And the unanimous response was, no. In the last 25 years, neuroscience has progressed, brain science has progressed, but we are not even one step closer to understanding what consciousness is. So I think finally, it came out in, I think, Scientific American or somewhere, and there was an article, one of the leading science magazines. It was all over the news. Finally, Christoph Koch had to admit defeat, and he handed over his, I think, a crate of champagne or something to David Chalmers. And they said, and finally he said, give us 25 years more. So this is called promissory materialism. Promissory materialism means, I will explain consciousness in terms of brain, একটু সময় দরকার 25 বছর 50 বছর দিন, then I will be able to explain it. And one scientist actually told me, Massimo, who is a philosopher and a biologist in the City University of New York. Once we were talking about this and in a philosophy seminar which he holds, and he said, look, Swami, it's no big deal. Life was considered to be mysterious 100 years back, and we thought science can never explain life. But today, we are able to explain life down to its molecular level. And that's a good enough example, a good enough explanation. So we promise, 25 years later, 50 years later, we'll be able to explain consciousness in that way and give a physical explanation for consciousness. Now, I said to him, that's an error in principle. I'll tell you why it's an error in principle. I gave him the argument. You see, when you say, I will explain life in terms of at the basic molecular level, what we are basically doing is taking a very complex objective phenomenon and explaining in terms of more fundamental, more basic objective phenomena. There is no problem in principle in doing that. It's hard in practice, but no problem in principle. But when you say, I am going to use objective phenomena, bursts of electricity in your brain, in the nervous system, in the neurons, to explain your subjective first-person experiences, there's a problem in principle. It's a category mistake. See, this thing becomes very clear from the Vedantic perspective. The perspective is this. What is consciousness from a Vedantic perspective? Whatever you can label as this, anidam chaitanyam, whatever you can label as this, that's an object, jado. This table, Therefore, it's an object. This shirt is an object. Even this body, it's an object. Even further, which is not understood in the philosophy of mind even today, there's a difference between mind and consciousness. Can we say this thought, this memory, this pleasure, this pain? We can say that. We do say it. In that case, even pleasure, pain, memory, thoughts, they are also jado, object. And they are not consciousness. They are objects of consciousness. Therefore, life explained in terms of molecular activity, jado explained in terms of jado. Fine. But if you want to explain consciousness in terms of electrical activity in the brain, you are trying to explain Chaitanya in terms of jado. No, there's a jump. Of course, you might say that, did it make any impression on him, this argument? It didn't. It didn't elicit any response from him. It's not that easy. Anyway, so this is the background. We are right now, there are a number of thinkers in the West coming not at all from an Eastern philosophy perspective. They are not coming from a Buddhist perspective or an Upanishadic perspective, entirely from the perspective of neuroscience or philosophy of mind. And they are seriously doubting whether consciousness can ever be explained in terms of brain. So this is the hard problem of consciousness. Now, let's do a little bit of Vedantic inquiry. Actually see for ourselves what Vedanta says. Vedanta says that this consciousness, it is pervasive in our lives. When you see, you are conscious. When we hear, we are conscious. When we smell, taste, touch, we are conscious, we are aware. These are first-person experiences. What we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, that keeps changing. But one fact does not change. It requires consciousness to explain, to experience all of these things. Consciousness runs in and through all these experiences. The point here is the same question in the Kena Upanishad. What is that one thing which illumines our thinking, hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching? In contrast it to Minsky's objection. It's not one thing. It's a basket of problems. You are thinking it's one thing. But here, the question in the Upanishad was it is one thing. And right now we are beginning to see that consciousness might be its own one thing, not a separate set of problems. So, when we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, whatever, we are conscious. When we think, we are clearly conscious. When we remember, we're conscious. When we fail to remember, tip of the tongue, we're conscious. When we desire something, we're conscious. When we hate, when we love, we are conscious. When we laugh and cry, we are conscious. All through our waking hours, consciousness runs in and through, and the claim is it is the same consciousness. What changes are the objects of experience. What changes are the thoughts in the mind. But consciousness illumines all of them, and it's that one unchanging consciousness. And not only in waking, when we fall asleep and we dream, in our dreams also, these are conscious experiences. What we experience changes. The dream, this waking world disappears and a dream world appears. But same consciousness runs through the waking and the dream, because first-person experience continues in waking and in dream. And the big claim in Vedanta is that in deep sleep, sushupti, when we fall asleep, when there is no experience of the external world, there is no experience of a dream world. In fact, there is no experience of a separate experiencer. I am sleeping. Such kind of experience is not there. If you experience that, then you are not sleeping. And yet the utter blankness, the utter darkness of deep sleep, Vedanta claims that's also an experience. And logically it makes sense, because we wake up and we claim, I was awake, I slept and dreamt, and there was a period of absolute blankness, I did not know anything. If we can report that, then it must have been an experience, a very peculiar kind of experience, not a subject-object experience, but an experience nevertheless. This one consciousness running through all of this, this is called the witness consciousness or Sakshi Chaitanya. So what? So what, one might say. Look at the applications of this Sakshi Chaitanya. All our problems, sources of pain and trouble and travail are in the world or in our relationships to the world, or in the body, or in the mind. I have a pain. Where? In the body. Notice, when you fall asleep and you dream, you don't experience the physical pain. But you might experience the suffering of a nightmare in the dream, right? So, all of these problems are physical problems, mental problems. If the consciousness by itself is distinct from the body, distinct from the mind, then the problems may belong to the body-mind, but not to consciousness. There's this lovely story which I have repeated so many times. I think some of you may have already heard it, but it's very telling. A gentleman went to the certain monk in the Himalayas and said, in Hindi, this story, I'll translate, but he said, Mahatma ji, मैं बहुत दुखी हूँ. Oh Swami, a monk, I'm in great suffering. I'm suffering. I'm unhappy. And the monk said, do you experience your unhappiness? आपको दुख का अनुभव है? Do you experience your unhappiness? Of course. Because I'm experiencing unhappiness, misery, that's why I have come to you. That's why I'm saying I'm unhappy. Then the monk said, if you experience your unhappiness, दुख का अनुभव अगर आपको है, तो आप दुख के दृष्टा हो, आप दुखी नहीं हो. Just as, what it means is this, if I experience this piece of cloth, then I don't become a piece of cloth. I am the witness of this piece of cloth. If I am the consciousness experiencing this body, then I am the witness of the body. I am not the body. If I am the witness of a thought, then I illumine and experience the thought, but I am not the thought. This feeling of unhappiness, depression, misery, which was not there, consciousness illumined the absence of misery. Now consciousness is illumining the presence of misery in the mind. After some time, consciousness will illumine the absence of misery again in the mind. The misery is not in consciousness as such, it's in the mind. आप दुख के दृष्टा हो, आप दुखी नहीं हो. So this gentleman went and thought that way. It works. It creates a psychological space between us and our troubles. So he came back and he said to the monk, आप ठीक कहते, you are right. मैं बहुत शांत हूँ अब. I'm very peaceful now. Immediately the monk was upon him like a ton of bricks and he said, आप शांत नहीं हो, आप मन में शांति की दृष्टा हो. You are not peaceful. You are the witness of the peace in the mind. You're that same consciousness which is illumining a peaceful mind. Now see, this is brilliant. Because the moment you identify with the peace in the mind, after some time the mind will again become disturbed. And you will say, oh, in the ashram, in the Himalayas, in Calcutta Club of all places, I was very peaceful. Now when I've come out into the Calcutta traffic, I've become very restless again. No. You were the witness of the peace in the mind. You are now the witness of the restlessness in the mind. Being thus free of peace and restlessness, that is true peace. The Upanishads say, Mandukya Upanishad, Shantam. That means the self, consciousness, is not peaceful. The mind can be peaceful or restless. But the consciousness itself is peace itself. Your very nature, our very nature as awareness is peace itself, which knows no disturbance, which cannot be disturbed. New Testament, Bible, Jesus Christ says, peace that passeth understanding. Now, in a Vedantic sense, it immediately makes sense. Understanding is buddhi. And the consciousness is that which illumines the buddhi, illumines the intellect. So the peace, which is the very nature of consciousness, it surpasses, passeth understanding. It's a very Vedantic interpretation of the New Testament statement. Now you see the deep impact, the use of this kind of philosophy. That all our problems, it creates a gap between you and the problems. Somebody came to a monk, and Vedantic monk, and was talking about the sorrows and sufferings in life. And this monk said, I'm not interested in your problems. I'm not interested in your problems. The gentleman thought, how cruel. You're not interested in my problems. The monk said, I'm not interested in your problems. I'm interested in you. The difference between you and your problems, I and my problems, the problems will still remain, but we are better placed to deal with these problems. See, let's take a step back. What can spirituality do and what can it not do? What does spirituality really do? Any kind of spirituality. It's very telling, one of the original sources in Buddhist texts, they talk about this story. Somebody went to the Buddha and asked him a question, a monk. I have a question for you. What is the question? You taught us there is suffering. You remember the Buddhas, how he became the Buddha? He saw an old man and a sick man and a dead man, a dead body. Old age, disease, death. And these are there, these are major forms of sorrow. The senior most member in our Vedanta society in New York is Bill Conrad. He's 99 years old. And he often says to me, Swami, old age is not for sissies. So you have to be really a tough person to withstand old age. So old age, disease, death, these are sorrow. The Buddha said, yes. And you said there is a freedom from sorrow. And you have found that freedom from sorrow. Nirvana, you have found it. Yes, what is your question? But I see, and we are also trying to follow your teachings. We are trying to be free of sorrow. But we are all getting older. Old age is still there. And we get sick from time to time. Disease is there. Some of us have died. Eventually we will all die. And more so, you, the Buddha, you are getting older. You get disease once in a while. And unfortunately, it's quite possible very soon you will also pass away from this world. So how did you overcome sorrow? Your whole project was, we'll go beyond sorrow. Old sorrow is old age, disease, death. Still those things are there. So how have we overcome, how have you overcome sorrow? So the Buddha said that this is what spirituality can do and cannot do. He said, imagine a person hit by an arrow. And imagine the pain. And immediately the person is hit by a second arrow. Imagine the pain and the suffering. And the Buddha says, the first arrow is what the world throws at you. Life, old age, disease, and finally death. That's the first arrow. The second arrow is our reaction to that. Is our reaction to what life is throwing to us. And this is the Buddha's insight. Most of our suffering, not all, most of our suffering is caused by the second arrow. Any doctor, and there are so many doctors among you, any doctor will tell you straight away, yeah, that's right, we have seen patients, some with terminal illness, and they handle it with calmness and dignity and strength. And we have seen patients who don't have such a serious problem, but they bring the house down, and they are unhappy, nothing satisfies them, they're scared, they're terrified. Who is suffering more? It's the second one. The actual cause of suffering is not all that important. It's our reaction to that suffering which is important. And the Buddha said, what I teach you will remove the pain from the second arrow. It will change our response to life. The first arrow, the Buddha said, I cannot do anything about that. Everybody will get older. Everybody will get sick sometime or the other. And the body will die. But this knowledge is going to save you from suffering. Most of suffering is due to the second arrow. Now you see, in a deep philosophical sense, if I'm able to appreciate myself not as a physical creature, a body, not just as a mental creature, a person, a mind, but also just as this illumining awareness with a mind and a body. From that fortress of awareness, I can look upon the vicissitudes of life, the ups and downs of life, and I can play my role there. I was just reading, if you are enlightened, how does an enlightened person deal with life? A text from the Yoga Vasishta, this morning I was reading. It says that the enlightened one is not concerned about the past, with no regret for the past and no anxiety for the future, deals with the present. Hasan Neva, very nicely put, with a gentle smile. Deals with the present with a gentle smile. Hasan Neva, whatever is presented to you at this moment, no anxiety for the future, no regrets for the past. I saw a cartoon once. How do we live our lives? It's like one of those slapstick, Charlie Chaplin movies. This person is constantly slipping on a banana peel, falling backwards or falling forwards. And that's funny, but that's what we are doing. We continuously keep falling backwards into reminiscence, those were the days. This is a song also, those were the days. Those were the days. Or with regret. Why did I do that? Why did I say that? Why did I not do that? And with anxiety for the future, expectation or anxiety for the future. We are continuously either falling forwards or falling backwards. The enlightened one is centered in one's nature as pure awareness, and then deals with the world as it happens, as we go through life. This is not yet Vedanta. There's one more step before I'm done. I'll quickly pass over it. See, what we did now, technically speaking, those who are trained in philosophy, you will recognize it as something called Sankhya. This distinction between consciousness and the rest of the universe. So I am this witness consciousness, and there is this mind and the body and the universe. And these two are distinct. But Advaita Vedanta takes a further step forward and asks this question. Oh, by the way, before we take that step forward, David Chalmers, who talks about the irreducibility of consciousness, that consciousness is a fundamental part of this universe, and not just Chalmers. I've met a number of people who do that now. Some are philosophers, some are scientists. Donald Hoffman is one of them, a cognitive scientist from, I think, UC Riverside in California. There are a number of them. So David Chalmers talks about panpsychism, that consciousness is not produced by the brain, but rather consciousness is a fundamental feature of this universe. It is most manifest in living brains, but it's there everywhere. And I was just thinking, what David Chalmers is saying in the 21st century here, in New York, and in today's world. Kapila, Swami Vivekananda called Kapil Muni, Kapila, the first philosopher of the human race. Thousands of years ago, Kapila said there are two realities in this universe: matter and consciousness. Prakriti, Purusha. Prakriti is all of nature, and Purusha is consciousness. Purusha does not mean male here, it means consciousness. So we are all a combination of Prakriti and Purusha. Our bodies and minds are Prakriti, and consciousness is Purusha. This is exactly what in the 21st century now in NYU, David Chalmers and some others are proposing. But Advaita Vedanta goes further. It says, what is the relationship between this material universe and you, the consciousness? Remember, the materialist is also a monist of a kind. The materialist seeks to reduce consciousness to matter. That seeks to explain how brain is producing consciousness. And therefore, ultimately, fundamental reality is matter only. Is the material universe. So this is what the materialist is trying to do. The Advaitin, the Vedantin, is doing exactly the opposite. The Vedantin says consciousness is fundamental, and what we call material is an appearance in consciousness. That does not change what we experience in the world. Once you realize fundamental reality is consciousness, and you are that fundamental reality, this is basically the Upanishadic equation, Tattvamasi, you are that, or the realization, Aham Brahmasmi, I am this limitless consciousness in which bodies and minds and this external world is experienced. And it does not change the fact that science is real and it can work. Every human endeavor is entirely worthwhile and it will all work, but the fundamental reality is consciousness, and we are that fundamental reality. It dramatically changes your position in the universe. Otherwise, let me just say, what is at stake here? Suppose the Vedantic view is not right. Suppose the materialist reductionist view is right. Then what is at stake? There is a physicist, Sean Carroll. He is a physicist at Caltech. I met him a couple of times, but I saw this. What I'm saying is a talk, is a debate between him and Alan Wallace, who is a Buddhist, a professor of Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, and teacher also. So Sean Carroll said there, he's a reductionist, materialist. He said, our worldview is, yes, physicists cannot explain politics or psychology or economics, and we do not understand those systems too well. But what we do know, atoms, subatomic particles, quarks, maybe even superstrings. And there are patches in physics which are still not explained, which are still not understood. But his basic claim is this, and a very important claim is this. We already know enough. When we will solve the remaining gaps in physics, the big picture will not be changed. We already know enough. And what we know tells us, for example, there can be nothing after death. Yeah. Physical death of the body is the end. Nothing continues after death. Now, if nothing continues after death, then one thing I can say, all the religions of the world will fall flat, because they all are predicated on something existing after continuity after death. So this is what is at stake. Our sense of who or what we are. From the Vedantic perspective, it has the beauty. So why should we at all, accept the Vedantic perspective and not the scientific and the present materialist reductionist perspective? The present reductionist materialist perspective cannot explain consciousness because of the hard problem of consciousness. And this is a problem coming from their side. I had this interesting exchange with Deepak Chopra once. I had a dialogue with him in New York. And he said to me, not in the dialogue, in the green room, Swami ji, ये सब हमारे theory लेके चला रहे हैं, कोई credit नहीं देता है हम लोगों को. So all these, physicists and philosophers, they're using our philosophies and they're not giving us credit. I said, Deepak ji, that's wonderful. If somebody talks about the irreducibility of consciousness and says, I have not got it from Upanishads, I have not got it from the Dalai Lama, I have got it from my entirely Western philosophy of mind. This is where we have come to. That's much better for you. And much better for even Indian thought, Upanishads, Vedanta, this from various angles, from different cultures, across oceans of time and space. If you're coming to similar conclusions, that strengthens your case. It's not a problem of giving credit. I don't think it's all that important that we're always hungry for credit for something. This is more important, that there's a consensus developing, not a consensus, that's a big word, but certain questions are emerging across thinkers, philosophers of mind, neuroscientists. Oh yes, another one. AI. This is a new thing in the world today. Artificial intelligence, chat GPT and everything. Before I delve into it, before I forget, Sam Altman, who is the founder of OpenAI, chat GPT, somebody told me in his Twitter feed, X feed now, so somebody asked him, tell us one thing that we don't know. One thing that you believe that we do not know. And he said, Atman is equal to Brahman. I don't know, you can check it out. Some people checked it out and told me it's true. He is interested in Vedanta and he does actually think that the Vedantic worldview is valid. All right, here's my point about AI, for what it's worth. Now you have these machines, these programs, which can replicate some of the most subtlest, finest capacities of the human mind. Creativity. We thought this is uniquely human, but it's not. Not that these machines or ChatGPT is creative in the way you or I am creative, but it can replicate those results. So for example, when somebody introduced me to ChatGPT, I asked ChatGPT, write me a poem on Vivekananda. And it wrote a nice poem. Not poet laureate material, but pretty good, I would say. And then it proceeded to do something no poet in the world can ever do. I asked it to write another poem on Vivekananda, and yet another, and it wrote 3 different poems within 3 minutes, less than that. And I'm sure if you ask ChatGPT to keep writing poems on Vivekananda, it will do so all day long and produce passably different poems. Which poet in the world can do that? In NYU, we were shown pictures, paintings, and said, please distinguish between which were painted by AI and which are painted by human beings. And we could not. Nobody could. Their short stories are being written by AI. I read about the science fiction magazine, which has been put out of business. They shut down publication because they got so many submissions, so many short stories, all written by ChatGPT. I have heard from professors, from lecturers in different universities across the world, who are all worried about assignments which are, refined or done through AI. So students are submitting assignments written by AI. Creativity. So this AI is duplicating some of the most subtlest, the most refined aspects of the human mind. Intelligence, creativity, decision-making, driverless cars. San Francisco, those who have gone, you've seen. And there's an amazing sight of cars going past you without drivers, without passengers also sometimes, and driving better than you. So AI is doing all of that. You might say, so what's your point? My point is it's doing all of it except one thing. Yes, consciousness. None of these machines, driverless car, ChatGPT, or whatever you call it, none of them are conscious or remotely close to replicating consciousness. See, my question here is this. Creativity is complex. Intelligence is complex. Decision-making is complex. And you're able to model that. Why are you not able to model consciousness, which is very simple? What does consciousness do? It does only one thing and one thing only. It gives us first-person experience, subjectivity. Why do none of these machines, why do none of these AI-powered robots, cars, none of them have any kind of subjectivity, consciousness? You might say, how do you know? I don't know. Ask the experts. Ask the people in Silicon Valley, in Google. Is your AI, is your machine, your robot, is it conscious? And they will immediately tell you, of course not. Have you programmed it to be conscious? Of course not. Not only of course not, those programmers will tell you, we have no idea where to start. We have absolutely no idea. We can model memory and intelligence and creativity, but not consciousness. Why not? This is my question. So there is something in principle different about consciousness, and this tallies very well. Why with Vedantic, Buddhist theories of the mind, Sankhyan theory of the mind, that mind is also object. Whatever you can categorize as this is an object. This thought, object. And therefore, it is no surprise that AI can model it. This creative poem, this, no surprise that AI can model it. But the pure subject which experiences, that's not this. It cannot be indicated by this. So Vedanta says this entire material order is an appearance in consciousness, like a dream in consciousness. But remember, dream, don't push the metaphor too far. It's not false in the sense of an illusion. Science will continue to work. All our human endeavors are entirely valid. But you are fundamental to this universe. Our place in the universe is not, like a little bit of speck of matter, a whirlpool of matter existing for a blink in the ocean of time and gone. No. Vedanta says the glory of the human spirit, not as a person, but as pure consciousness, is immeasurable. It's the fundamental reality of this universe. Now, some practical applications, and then I'm done. The next few minutes I've got. What does this mean for our lives? Vedanta is manifested at different levels. One would be, for example, ethics. Why should I be good to others? This whole question of the foundation for ethics. Goodness, truth, taking care of others, selfless. Vivekananda puts it in a dramatic way, rhetorically. He asks, why should I not cut the throat of my neighbor if it is to my benefit? And the answer from a Vedantic perspective is, it is this oneness of all existence, that this one consciousness in which this entire material order and our bodies and personalities manifest, play around and disappear. Ashtavakra sings, Mai ananta maham bodhav ascharyam jiva vichaya Udyanti, gnanti, khelanti, pravishanti, swabhavata. In me, the limitless ocean of consciousness, amazing are these sentient beings who arise as waves, play around, clash with each other. I remember one monk teaching us in the Himalayas this particular verse. He says, all the sentient beings arise in the ocean of consciousness, play around. Khelanti, he translated as, I love you, I love you. Gnanti, they clash with each other. I'm going to divorce you, I'm going to divorce you. And then finally what happens? Pravishanti. They again cease back into that ocean of consciousness. What we call death, of the individual death. So this is the Vedantic perspective. Upon this oneness is based ethics. The one common principle in all the religions of the world, it's called the golden rule, that you should treat others as you expect them to treat you. Bhagavad Gita says that yogi is the greatest who sees all other beings as the self, who behaves the same to all other beings. Samam pashyan hi sarvatra samavasthitam ishwaram, seeing the same divinity everywhere. and that yogi is supposed to be the highest. Treat others as you would expect them to treat you. New York, in the United Nations headquarters, on the 3rd floor, this is inscribed, the golden rule in all religions. That treating others as you would expect them to treat you. But the question might arise, what is the ground for that? I will treat myself well and I expect good treatment for myself. I may treat others shoddily, shabbily. Why not? The answer is here in Vedanta, that because the other is not another. You and the other are one consciousness. Whether one accepts it or not, whether one understands it or not, whether one is interested or not, you are that one consciousness. I still remember, it echoes in my ears, a monk in the high Himalayas, Gangotri, saying this. Tum jano ya na jano, tum mano ya na mano, tum hi Ram. Whether you know it or you do not know it, whether you accept it or you do not accept it, you are Rama, you are God. You are this, in the sense of this one consciousness. This is the ground for ethics. Some of you, I know there are some who are experts in this, and you know what a deep, deep question this is, that what is the basis for ethics? And philosophers have been struggling through the centuries for this. So here is one answer. Vedanta puts forth this answer. This underlying oneness, and this oneness is not something stipulated by dogma or doctrine. This oneness is not something that you're supposed to believe in. It's something that's open for investigation and your discovery. Let me tell you, this Vedantic spirituality, how is it unique and different from other kinds of spirituality? There's one kind of spirituality which is faith-based. Bishash, faith-based. And most people think religion is bishash, faith. In fact, in the United States, they don't even say religion. They say, what's your faith? But here in India, we know that religion can be of different kinds. Not all religions are faith-based. For example, Buddhism. It's not exactly a faith-based religion in that sense. So one kind of religion is God exists. You must have faith in God. If you ask why, no, our scriptures tell us so. It's stipulated by dogma and doctrine. God exists. Bishash. The devotional kind of religion, the bhakti kind of religion, which is valid, by the way. I'm not criticizing it. It's valid, very much valid. Sri Ramakrishna was a Parama Bhakta. So it's valid, but it depends on faith. If you start with doubt, it will not work for you. If you start straight away, if you start from the beginning with Sam Harris or Christopher Hitchens or Richard Dawkins, then bhakti will not work for you. Today we can doubt it. There's a skeptic will say, I don't believe in God. I think not only skeptic, every teenager is a skeptic. I think in every house, all parents must have said, so at least that's the state of mind in teenage. So that is one problem with the devotional kind of religion. There's another kind of religion, which is an empirical kind of religion, which is very peculiar to India, the mystical kind of religion. You will meditate and you will have experiences, extraordinary mystical experiences, which will prove to us the truth of the claims of religion. After all, it was right here in Calcutta that more than 100 years ago, the young boy Narendranath Datta, he went around asking this most empirical of questions. Have you seen God? Not, does God exist? Why should I believe in God? Not like that. Have you seen God? Day before yesterday, I was talking to a most eminent philosopher, Professor Arindam Chakravarti, who was outside India working in Hawaii for the last 30 years, but he has now come back to India, and he's now just a couple of days back, he's joined Ashoka University. So he was giving a talk at the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture in Gold Park. And he said, the Indian spirituality is the most empiricist of all, because always here is the question of experiencing God. Bhagavad Darshan, Bhagavad Labh, not just Bhagavad Bishash in a dogmatic way. It's the most empiricist of all. And in a very typically Arindam Chakravarti turn, he said, rather it is science which depends on reliable testimony. Most of science, at least at the level at which we inquire it, is not directly connected with experimentation or testing of hypothesis. It's reliable testimony. What I mean by this is that there's a book, Why Should You Trust Science? And I was at the release of the book. This was at Harvard University about 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember I was running from a class in Madhyamaka Buddhism conducted by Professor J. Garfield. And I said, sir, there is this book release, I want to attend it. Why should we trust science? And the professor said, remember, he was teaching Nagarjuna, anti-foundationalism. So he said, why should we trust science? Well, it better not be because we tell you to trust science. But that's what it turned out to be. Amazing. The professor who wrote that book, she is a geologist. It's not experiment. She said, I am a scientist. I have never conducted an experiment in my life. The way we work is, we gather data, we form a hypothesis, we write a paper, and then it is evaluated by a committee of our peers, a system of experts in our field who vet it and say this is okay, this is not okay. Basically, it is what is called apta vakya in Sanskrit, reliable testimony. Most of science at the level at which we encounter it. So this demand for empirical experience, that's another kind of spirituality. But so by meditation, Patanjali Yoga, by meditation, I can have extraordinary experience like Sri Ramakrishna had, vision of Kali, very empirical approach. Now what is the problem with that? It's valid, absolutely valid. I believe in the validity of genuine mystical experiences. But the problem with that is, it can be doubted. By the very definition of mystical experience, it's not a public experience. Kathamrita, when we read Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, Kathamrita, we see Sri Ramakrishna is having a vision of Ma Kali. Very good. But notice one thing, nobody around him is having that vision. So the natural reaction is, ekta pagol. So that's what many people thought about Thakur, the Pagla Bamun. How have mystics been received throughout the ages in different religions? They've always been accused of being crazy or mad. So this is a problem. In today's world, much more polite, much more correct, politically correct. Nobody's going to accuse you of being crazy. But a neuroscientist will tell you that we have no doubt that you're experiencing some light, some vision, you're feeling one with the world. That's because you have a clot in this part of your brain and a little stroke there, and that's why you're feeling like this. Not that you're really one with the world, universe, or you're seeing God, nothing like that. So it can be doubted. Mystical experience can be doubted precisely because it's not a shared public experience, well understood experience. That's why it can be doubted. Hume, he said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. So I am seeing God is definitely an extraordinary claim. So it requires not only proof, it requires extraordinary proof. Now, contrast that with what we did in Vedanta just now. Nobody asked you to believe in anything. Nobody asked you to have some mystical, extraordinary experiences. What experience do we need? Just the experience of being conscious. We all are conscious. Experience of waking, dreaming, sleeping. Experiences of subject and object, drashta and drishya, seer and the seen. The beauty of the Vedantic approach is, it starts with quotidian experience available to everybody. Nobody can doubt it. It starts with the Descartian indubitability of the self, that I exist. Nobody can doubt it. And it builds its way up from there, all at every step being faithful to experience and to reason. It's a subtle path. And that's why it's not very popular. But I think it's worth considering. This is where I find, if I talk about bhakti, nobody's going to listen to me in the halls of academia, in the psychology departments or psychology. They might be interested, especially in psychiatry, if I talk about that. But otherwise, they will not be interested. And if I talk about yogic experiences, extraordinary experiences, they might be interested. এখন নিউ ইয়র্কে তো সবাইকার যোগিক এক্সপিরিয়েন্স হচ্ছে, because they have legalized marijuana, weed, that in the evening, especially if you step outside in Central Park, সবাই যোগী, সবাইকার দর্শন হচ্ছে. So you can doubt it. But the beauty of the Advaitic approach is, the Vedantic approach, the Jnana Yoga approach is, it proceeds on not on faith. It does not ask you to believe anything. On experience, on publicly available common experience, and on the basis of knowledge, not belief. These are the advantages. And it says the truth we are looking for is available right now, right here, all the time, and it is you. You are that. See, the reality called Brahman, Atman, is not separated from you by space. It's not somewhere else. It's here. In the United States, when you drive along, you'll see these big billboards. It says, heaven is a place. What does that mean? It's some other place. It's not here. This is the world, and there is some heaven. Hote pare. But Vedanta does not say that. What we are looking for, it may be there. It's in heaven also, but it's also here in the earth. It's right here. Another billboard, often you will see, after death, a black billboard, rather ominous. After death, you will meet God. And below it will be written, call 1800 something. Some dollars you have to give, and they will tell you about it, what will happen to you after death. After death, you will meet God. But what I found interesting about that was the time word, after death. Ekhon noy, not now, after death. But what Vedanta is saying, you're conscious right now. The Atman, Brahman, whatever we are talking about is right here, right now. And it's not something other than you. It's right here, right now. It is you. So these are some of the very unique approaches of the Vedantic path. It is the basis for ethics. This is one use. Why should we be ethical? Why should we love others? Why should we be considerate? Why should we be gentle with, in our dealings with everybody? It's because we are one reality. Apon Jon. Ma Sharoda, we're talking about Ma Sharoda's birthday just a few days back. Such a simple instruction. Her very last words. Keu por noy ma, jagotta tomar. Shabaike apon kore nite sheko. Nobody is an other to you. Nobody is alien to you. They are all yours. Learn to make them all your own. This is fundamental expression of Advaitic ethics. Then another, consequence of this, service. This is something that Vivekananda emphasized. If we are all one consciousness, you are one consciousness, the same consciousness is also that poor person on the street outside. You are the top of society. That person seems to be at the bottom of society. And yet we are all one consciousness. Why will you not help your more unfortunate brother? Since you are one, his suffering and your suffering are one. Jamon amar koshto hoy, taru koshto hoy. As I fill my stomach, as I give myself the best of clothes and education, I should also endeavor to fill the stomach of that hungry man and educate the ignorant. Vivekananda therefore said, my God the hungry, my God the sick, my God the ignorant, my God the wicked. Dushtu lok, kharap lok, so called. But if you are one consciousness, that also must be that same consciousness there. People misunderstand Vedanta. Harvard Divinity School student, smart grad student, say, one reason why I don't like your Vedanta, it makes Adolf Hitler and Mother Teresa the same. But in one sense, they are the same, as that one consciousness. As personalities, they are not the same. Huge difference. Ekjon saintly hote pare, ekjon demonic hote pare. But beyond both are the one consciousness, and therefore the demonic can also become the saintly at one time. The saintliness is a better expression of that oneness. Another question, possible question, onek prashna hote pare. Another question, then the good and evil are both expressions of that one consciousness. They are same, they are not the same. Vivekananda put it this way, test of truth. Oneness is the test of truth, because it corresponds to that ontological reality of one Brahman. And division is a sign of falsehood. Unselfishness, selflessness is a test of truth. Selfishness, that only for this body and mind, ami or amar, that is a sign of falsity. Strength is a test of truth. Weakness, he says, weakness is poison, avoid it. Avoid it like death, Vivekananda said. Strength is life. So, all things are not equal. Some things are better expressions of Brahman or Atman. The more ethical, the more one, the more selfless you are, the better expression of your own reality. You're living closer to the truth of your own self. The more selfish we are, the more ignorant we are, the more scared we are. Boy, further we are away from the expression of our own reality. We are living in a disjoint from our own reality. So this is the practical application of Vedanta in our daily lives. I mean, I see it all over, people who have not even read Vedanta. There was this, maybe the greatest philosopher you have never heard of, unless you are a philosopher, Derek Parfit. So I was reading, there's a nice new biography of Derek Parfit. He was I think, Oxford philosopher probably. And he worked in ethics. And his conclusion is so much in line with Vivekananda. I don't think he's ever read Vivekananda. He says, through sheer reason, he proves that the ideal life is the most selfless life. The minimum you can keep for yourself and the maximum you can, he shows it through mathematics, he shows it. The maximum you can give away for others, that's the ideal life. Any falling short of that is unethical. That was basically his conclusion, which follows directly from the Vedanta, the Vivekananda take on Vedanta, this what he called practical Vedanta. I have run out of time completely, so I must once again express my gratitude to the administration of the Calcutta Club and all its members and all the guests here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Bhalo thakben shobai, shantite anonde thakben. Thank you.
धन्यवाद महाराज के प्रणाम. I now request the President to propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Maharaj. It's mesmerized. We are absolutely, by your wonderful eloquence and knowledge and everything together, put together. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, for me at least. Thank you so much. I have to thank a lot of people, but as Maharaj said, there are certain, when we contemplated this program, some of the people who I must admit, one is our decorator, Ajoy. He said, sir, he's coming, I'll give you all the chairs and all this free. He has done that. Next to Ajoy was Savorites, our caterer, Shushanto. He's providing tea for everyone free. Next is our man, Devashish, the IT person, and Indrajit. When they heard that you were coming, they were so excited, they said that every day we'll put in our WhatsApp group and in our message. They are never so active, I'll tell you, for the other jobs. So this is the thing, and all my staff, Dravid, everyone, the CEO, everyone, you see the amount of enthusiasm these guys have. So this is the thing what you have instilled to us. This is the thing which you have instilled to us, and we are ever grateful for you, sir. Sir, you have instilled a sense of enlightenment in our hearts, which is so important in our rustic daily life today. So thank you very much, and thank you all, and I thank my club for everything. I thank Dr. Gaurav Das, please, thank you so much for helping us. So have a safe trip back home. The cup of tea is ready. Thank you very much. Good night.
Sir,